A very warm welcome to General Counselling, the podcast from Montresor Legal. Thank you so much for joining us. As you probably know by now, General Counselling is the legal podcast where we bring together leaders from private practice together with the cream of in-house to share their insights on the latest issues across the legal landscape. We've got some brilliant episodes coming up, so to get them hot off the press, hit subscribe, and if you're feeling really generous, why not leave us a review or spread the word on LinkedIn. We've gone for a bit of a departure from our usual format this week. On General Counselling, standard operating procedure is to put a law firm partner together with a senior in-house lawyer to talk through issues within their worlds. But today, it's just one guest, and they're not even a lawyer anymore. Part of my day job involves talking to lawyers who are at a crossroads in their career. Should they push for partnership? Would they make it at their firm? Would their marriages survive if they did? Should they go in-house? The usual dilemmas faced by city lawyers. One of the questions that comes up a lot is what they could do if they left law completely. My guest today, Martin Anayi, has done just that. Starting out as an associate at Pennington's, he's now the chief executive of the Guinness PRO14 Rugby League. Over the next 30 minutes or so, we'll find out exactly how he pulled that off. Martin, welcome. Thanks so much for joining General Counselling.
Thanks, Tom.
So, tell us a little bit about your legal career before you moved into business.
I think career sounds a bit probably too grand, actually, to be honest. No, so I started off, I trained at College of Law in Guildford. So I did conversion, I did a business management degree. And then went to Pennington's and did my training contract there. And I think I spent about 2 years PQE there before moving in-house to IMG, the sports management company. So at Pennington's, it was one of those quite traditional schoolings, I guess. You did the usual training contract in 4 different departments across 2 years, and I did commercial, corporate, and then did private client and litigation. So try to get as broad an approach as possible through the training contract, and then qualified into the commercial department.
Perfect. And what made you decide to leave the glamour of associate life behind?
So your intro there is spot on. I mean, I was going through the very same sort of process that you go through as a sort of 25-year-old or whatever it was. And think, right, do I really push on, work endless hours and constantly on the button with the billing, or do I go in-house, or do I leave the profession completely? So, I mean, it really was that point. I was playing relatively good level of rugby at that point as well. Pennington's were brilliant. They obviously paid through the law school and the training contract, but they allowed me to go and play semi-pro rugby at the same time. So it was pretty unusual environment, and they were very supportive of that. But I got to a bit of a crossroads there too. It was either going to go fully pro rugby, and I'd have to leave London Welsh, or I was going to have to make a choice effectively. So it definitely was a crossroads moment. And I think I made the right choice, which was actually to try and combine the two things that I was most passionate about. I knew in my heart of hearts I wasn't going to be good enough to make it as a pro rugby player in the Premiership. So, and that's where London and Welsh were heading at the time. So I decided to try and look to in-house and trying to look for sports companies to be involved with, and thankfully the biggest, IMG, had a role going.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an easy transition to make that when getting into like one of the really sexy industries as an in-house lawyer. How did you find that?
Yeah, I think I was just quite determined from an early age, actually. I remember looking at IMG when I was about 17, 18, which again is quite unusual, I think, but and I remember at the time thinking, right, I want to be a sports agent.
He doesn't.
I think Jerry Maguire had just come out at the time. So, it was one of those moments I was thinking, okay, I know I want to be involved with sport, hopefully as a professional myself. But if that's not going to happen, then what else can I do around it? And I went to an intern program at IMG. And the head of HR there said, look, our founder, Martin McCormack's a lawyer, and, you should think about that route. Everybody who really makes it through at IMG is kind of one of three things. They're either amazing at sales, which I'm not, they're a finance person, or they're a legal person. And I said, brilliant. Oh, I think legal is probably the one out of those three that I would sort of naturally gravitate towards. And she said, right, go and become a lawyer and come back. So I suppose that's what I did. Yeah.
That is interesting, because there's not that many industries where lawyers are that well represented in the sort of upper echelons of the business. You went into IMG originally as a lawyer into their in-house legal team.
Yeah. So they're now WME IMG Endeavour. So when I went there, they'd just been bought by Teddy Forsman, Forsman Little Private Equity. And at that point, they were still operating divisions. And the division that I went into as their legal counsel, which was quite a significant division, was events and federations.
Yeah.
And that had everything from Rugby World Cup to motorsport and everything in between, anything to do with federations, literally, tennis, ATP Tour. We worked with golf. We were doing major tournaments around the world. We were consulting on the Ryder Cup. IMG was really, really buzzing at that point. And events and federations was sort of this group which covered a lot of different disciplines. And I went in as their legal counsel. So there was a GC above us, John Lofhagen, absolute legend. And he had a bunch of young lawyers, associates who were just really, really hungry, love their sport, or love the expert, the field, the subject matter. So we did fashion. We were the biggest modeling agency in the world. We had the biggest licensing and merchandising program around the world. And I slotted into the events and federations part of that, and gravitated, of course, to rugby.
And how did you find that transition from being in external counsel to actually being immersed in a business?
It was the biggest baptism of fire, because, at Pennington's, which was, incredible for what it was and very nurturing and so on. I had two brilliant partners there who really wanted me to come through and helped me as much as possible. But the work, just the turnover of workload was nothing in comparison to IMG. I mean, I was getting probably 30 or 40 contracts to work on per week.
Yeah.
So just that turnover of different types of contract meant that my schooling on the job was significant. I remember John Lofhagen saying, right, I think you probably need to go, which is a nice way of putting it. You probably need to go and do some continuous, professional development here. Get out to a few of these courses, and, so sort of paid whatever, $2,000 for a week's intensive course on, contract law. And it's amazing how much you don't know as an associate, and that's certainly what faced me in the first couple of years at IMG. But then you get into your groove at IMG, and you tend to see a lot of the same or similar contracts after a while. And
so when you're looking, was a move into outside legal something that you thought was your direction of travel when you moved in there, or did an opportunity spring up and it was quite unexpected?
Yeah, do you mean sort of leaving the legal part of it? Yeah. Again, I remember meeting the head of events and federations, actually quite a legend within IMG again, which is a guy called Ian Todd. And Ian was one of the first employees, I think, from Martin McCormack. So he really set up IMG in London. And he's represented some of the biggest sporting clients in the world, and was responsible for bringing on the likes of Federer and Tiger Woods and everybody that IMG represented. Worked for Nike for many years, and then came back and was effectively the CEO of the London office.
We should probably do a podcast on how you get to be that guy.
He is, yeah. There was four or five guys that we were all in awe of, and Ian Todd was one of those for sure. And he said, you've got a decision to make. You're getting too expensive, and I think this is a conversation that they had with all the lawyers. You're getting too expensive for the company, so you're either going to go out, you're going to leave the company and go and work for a private law firm, and we'll carry on a love friendly relationship, or you can stay and get paid what you're getting paid now. You're just not going to get paid more, or you can go into the business side and start making us some money. And so that I got given a choice. You go and actually hustle and make us money as a lawyer, and then the natural kind of segue for that is client representation, and M&A.
So as you said, that sort of, as a lawyer, the way so many people make money is selling legal services, and it's understandable why that is. But having to that word hustle, I mean, you see some of the best partners who've got a good level of hustle, but actually going in and like not being someone who's controlling risk or managing transactions, but actually having to originate stuff is quite a big step.
And actually, I think that as a partner is quite, there are two types of partner. Maybe I'm massively overgeneralizing, but partners who hustle, go out and get the business and bring it in, and the other partners that are there doing the hard graft, if you like, and doing the nitty gritty and managing the risk and etc. And they're, just from my experience over however long, dealing with law firms, you're one of those two. Very rarely are you both.
I think as well, some of the ones who do the work might be in bits where the work comes in from somewhere else. So you're a pensions or a tax, or you're the support function. If you're a private equity partner or a corporate partner, you've got to have the hustle, because if you're not, you're probably not going to get up into the equity of these places.
And I won't I'll name Max Duffy at Bird & Bird, who's our client relationship manager. I think he's one of those exceptional few, because he used to play rugby. Maybe he's got an incredible level of detail knowledge of sports and sports regulation, contract law, etc. But he doesn't hustle, but he's good at getting new business, because he knows what he's talking about. He's personable. People like him. So, I think that's probably as close to hybrid as I've seen.
Yeah. So, you then made the transition from in-house counsel. What was your what was the first gig you got outside in the business?
So I worked on Rugby World Cup 2011 in the sort of operational side of the business. I thought that was a route that I was going to go down and sort of become effectively a kind of sort of business relations, that sort of role. Alan Gilpin, who's now COO of World Rugby and CEO of Rugby World Cup, he was in my role before me, so I stepped into his role, and he had done that. So he had made that transition to Rugby World Cup. He then had left the business, so there's an opportunity there. But actually, the one I ended up taking was motorsport. The motorsport division was growing. There was an M&A angle to it. We were looking at new acquisitions to bring into the company. We just bought Speedway when I joined, which was a small business that we'd grown sort of 4 or 5 times, and they wanted me to do something similar. I was already managing at that point Formula One drivers, both past and present. So Jackie Stewart was my client, and Heikki Kovalainen was racing for Lotus at the time. So we had that part of the business, and I was already doing that part with my day job as a lawyer. So I really went into that motorsport division, and we ended up acquiring and setting up a motorsport racing series, which I ran. So
And that so no background in motorsport, just
look, that's it. Up there.
There it is. For people listening, there's a picture.
There's a picture. It was called the World Rallycross. So there are 5 different world championships from the FIA, which is the governing body of 4-wheel motorsport, and we were lucky to set up the 5th. So that's Formula One right at the top, World Rally, and so on. And then we had this little one that no one knew about called World Rallycross, which we created from nothing. It was very IMG, because IMG is split into 2 parts: one, events and that kind of business around sponsorship and so on. And then the other part of the business, which was originally TWI, was media, and they had merged them together. And this was perfect. We ran the whole media program. We produced all the pictures. We sold the sponsorship. We ran the whole thing. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
So what were the things that you were doing then that you felt helped from your legal career? And what were the things that you had never experienced before and you needed to pick up?
Yeah, I definitely needed to hustle more. I think the legal stuff was just clear. I do it today. I mean, I've got 2 or 3 contracts in front of me now. So, the contract law stuff just sticks with you. And whilst I still rely on Bird & Bird, our law firm, I read a contract, I know what it means. I've got a pretty good head start. And that's the way I see it. I've probably just got a bit of a head start from the legal training that I've had. And then I can have a much more informed conversation with our lawyers. But I still rely on our external lawyers because those guys and ladies stay up to date. And it's difficult to do that when you're not in it.
It's not your job either, is it? I mean, that's why you go to external counsel, right? You're not going to keep on top of the changing regulations.
Changing case law, just things I haven't thought about. I think, they have the time to kind of drill down into the actual kind of the subject matter, the legal framework, tax implications, etc., etc. And I do rely on them quite heavily for that. I do rely on them heavily for that.
And then an opportunity came in to actually get back into rugby.
Yes, and then the Pro 12 at the time, which is the sort of Celtic League of rugby, professional rugby clubs, had just expanded with the Italian teams, and they were looking for a new kind of MD, CEO to come in to manage the sort of standing on its own 2 feet. It had been part of the British and Irish Lions and Six Nations, and now they wanted it to be sort of its own entity. And I did that. That was 5 years ago. So I moved completely out of the business, and now really just manage the business as a CEO, and definitely don't really have a legal string to my bow anymore, really, other than that contractual point I made earlier.
And so 2020 must have had its challenges for everyone in professional sports.
Actually, again, having said all that, just about legal hit us in the face in March 2020. Force majeure suddenly became the most talked about phrase ever. What it means and what the implications are and what notice periods are and when does it actually start and so on and so forth. I mean, I've never read so much about force majeure in my whole life. It's one of those boilerplate clauses that you get, and it's sort of 4th or 5th down the list of most important things in a contract, or maybe further down than that. It suddenly became the most important thing, and cost lots of people lots of money not getting right. Hopefully we won't make the same mistake again, but I now look at my contracts and think we need to really check every single line, and all those boilerplate clauses that you just kind of take for granted that your lawyers know what's right. Even they are now starting to review those and see, okay, is there anything in there that we should be looking at in the future?
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly seen, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because the wider economy obviously just took this massive hit, and there's lots of industries and sectors that are just getting absolutely hosed by this. Yeah. But the number of partners we know who are just insanely busy because of things like that, even if their clients are having a tough time.
We definitely rely on our law firms because we're across the UK and Ireland. We have 2 businesses, and we're relying on Bird & Bird, and we're relying on William Fry in Ireland more than we've ever done. We also completed on our CVC transaction. CVC came in as a minority investor into our business in May. So,
but that's interesting. That deal, you just would have thought that deal would have fallen apart, right? If you were looking at it,
Yeah, I mean, huge credit to them, and Freshfields were advising them. We got a good relationship with Freshfields as well, and I think everyone really took the right view, which was, COVID is a 1 to 2 year hit. It's pretty significant. Can we ride that through? Yes. what does year 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 look like? And the view is actually it doesn't change that much for professional sport. And one thing that they were spot on with at CDC is that media disruption, which was already occurring around direct-to-consumer products, Netflix, etc., would become more prevalent and more widely used, and that is a potential revenue stream direct to rights holders in the future. And so effectively, it's just accelerated that process of disruption, which is good for the industry. So whilst we can't have fans back in the game yet, and that is, terribly impactful, once they do come back, actually other parts of our business are stronger.
Yeah, I mean, the guys and girls at CVC do tend to call these things right over the long term, in my experience of them.
Exactly. The smart cookies. They also just I think they love the sport. They can see the future of it. They know what they want to do with it, and what we believe is the right thing to do, which is aggregation of rights. Again, hugely complicated from a commercial point of view, from an IP point of view, from a competition law point of view. But once we had ticked all those boxes and done the right process and procedures and really reviewed it to the nth degree over 18 months, it was still the right deal to do, even if COVID did hit.
Yeah. Well, the fact it executed in May of this year, which must have, I think, I don't know, May, I would say, was the worst month of this. I mean, May, maybe,
yeah.
But May was pretty bad.
May was in the eye of the storm, no doubt about it. I mean, we were losing money. We were, getting contracts being torn up. We didn't know when games might restart again. There was no pathway, no light at the end of the tunnel. So yeah, I mean,
closing a deal in that environment is, it's insane.
Yeah, it is. It was crazy, but it was the right thing to do. It's proving that now. They're hopefully happy with where we're going, and it doesn't really change our mid to long term plans, actually.
So looking at, we have a load of listeners who I know will be looking at this going, I'm thinking about doing something outside law. If someone came to you and they were in your position, 10 years ago or whenever it was, what advice would you give them about how they should think about the decision to leave law and move into the business?
Yeah, it kind of really depends on what part of your job or their jobs they enjoy. Because if it's the subject matter more than the doing, if you like, if they and lots of people out there do enjoy the intellectual challenge of sparring with another lawyer on the other side, or looking at case law and really analysing it to the nth degree. If that is what you enjoy, stay in the profession, no doubt about it, because you're not going to get that level of intellectual challenge in what I do. What I do, the challenge comes in negotiating. It becomes in relationships. It's not intellectually challenging in the same way as I think a legal argument can become. And so I think if you enjoy that legal argument point and the intellectual challenge, then I think stay in the profession and find things within the profession that you enjoy talking about. and that's, I think, the key point is work on things that you like as a subject matter.
Yeah, I think that's especially relevant when you're actually quite a junior lawyer, because the interesting thing you said earlier was, in the business you went into, there was quite a long track record of lawyers moving in and being very good. And I guess that's because the art of negotiation is very relevant to the business. If you're looking at trying to get into a private equity fund or an investment bank in the front office, and you're not an absolute Jedi at Excel, you're probably going to struggle. And so it's almost, you have to make, it's difficult, but you have to make that decision if that's what you want to do early, and then go into somewhere whereby there are going to be options within the business that legal skills will be more at the fore in the business.
It's really difficult for junior lawyers there, and I know many who started out at the same time as me or before me or just after me who sort of just found their way because they got offered a contract, they got offered a seat, they got offered a place after that, PQE, they got and it kind of can happen in the legal profession because that kind of lockstep approach to it. where you just progress by staying, by being.
Yeah.
You don't progress by being what I do. In fact, you will go backwards very quickly. So it's just a different way of progressing your career. One, I think you can just progress by doing a good job and, you know, doing the work that's put in front of you. Those great lawyers, though, don't do that. The great lawyers I've seen who stay in private practice find their way to do it the way they want to do it. You know, there's new law firm being set up, Northridge. They wanted to change, so they just took it on themselves to go and change it. And I applaud that, because, you know, I think the legal profession probably does need a bit of disruption in the same way as the media world is just being disrupted.
The only thing I don't like about Northridge is that their partners are all quite a lot younger than me, and it makes me extremely depressed to see these guys go and set their own sports law firm up.
Well, I was at law school with John Walters, so I think I'm obviously younger than you then. No, I think I just always found them so interesting. They were at Charles Russell. They were doing an amazing job there. You know, we use them as well as Bird and Bird, and they just sort of took it upon themselves. You know, we want to do it slightly differently, so they did. But, you know, and that is really, really impressive, and I think those are the traits of the best lawyers out there.
You see it more in the States, don't you? In America, that's a very common thing. You get like entrepreneurial attorneys and they go and set their own practices up, whereas it doesn't happen nearly as much over here.
No, I actually don't, other than onside law, which again by ex-IMG guys before they set it up before I got there. They'd already left. Who we now are involved with as well from our European Cup rugby business. So Jamie Singer. So, you know, yes, I think there are very few that have done it and done it successfully and set up in an industry that they really want to be in and that they're passionate about, and they think they do a better job if they do that.
So if you were looking at the various bits of careers advice you've had over the years, what's the best bit of single careers advice you've ever had, and who gave it to you?
Actually, I think this is just a very simple, this was from a guy who was our CFO at IMG. He and Peter Griffiths, his name, and he set up the IPL cricket. This guy set it up. He ran it for 10 years or whatever it was. And he always said, you know, do an annual audit basically, and do you enjoy your job? Do you know, this is a really, really simple question. Do you enjoy your job? Yes or no? And you've got to look at that over a period of time and make sure it's not the deal you're working on or whatever. Do you enjoy your job? Okay, well, that's a pretty simple question. Are you still learning? Because he was really, really senior, and he chose to go to the NFL, right? From IMG. He chose to go to the NFL because he wanted to keep learning. This is, you know, how inspirational is that? You're kind of brave, go into a completely different environment because we always use the NFL, I still do, as being the kind of example of what professional sports has become in the States, obviously, but they're way ahead of where European sports are. He went and did it. He just went, right, I'm going to go and do that. After setting up IPL, after being at IMG for 25, 30 years. So I think that was quite inspirational, you know. And he said, keep learning every day, which I think is very relevant to the law, to the legal profession, obviously. And then one which was always, again, interested me as I went through the IMG phase was, are your options closed by staying? Are you closing down your options by staying? And I remember going to see a headhunter called me about 2 years before I left IMG. And he said, you're not going to be an IMG lifer, are you? And I'd been there for 6 years, right? So I actually genuinely thought I was going to be there for life. And then it was the first time I thought, well, is that not a good thing? And so it's sort of, you know, I think that's a really interesting way of approaching your year is, you know, ask yourself those 3 questions. And if you come out by saying, do you know what, I really enjoy what I'm doing now. I'm still learning. I'm still going out there trying to make myself better. And I'm not closing down my options by staying. If those three answers are stay, if one of those answers is no, then, or you know, yes, I am closing down my options, maybe it's time to move.
And you've got to be brave.
Yeah, brave. I think it's a lot easier being brave when you're single, you know, don't have any kids to worry about mortgage, you're 25. It was very easy to be brave then. I mean, it's a lot harder decision as you get older and you have more responsibilities.
Or I guess the other side, where if you've already made your money and, you know, whether if you know, if it doesn't work out, you know, you're not selling your house. That's fair.
Correct. Correct.
Well, look, just before we break, we ask every guest on the General Counselling podcast to name their GOAT lawyer. Now, we normally have to explain what GOAT means, but I imagine as a man of sports, you probably are familiar with
Right.
greatest of all time, an acronym.
Yeah.
So it can be anyone, real or fictional, alive or dead, highly personal or someone very well known. So Martin, who would you say your greatest of all time lawyer is?
So, because you've probably done a few of these shows, right, where people said Harvey Specter from Suits.
Yeah.
So I was going to go down that route.
He's actually still free. He hasn't got a.
He hasn't
got a few Ruth Bader Ginsburgs recently. For you know, you won't be surprised to hear. But Harvey Specter is free.
Well, as soon as you said, you know, real or fictional, I went for Harvey Specter. But actually, I'm going to go for real past Mark McCormack. Mark McCormack is the, you know, he obviously left a pretty significant mark on my life, and you know, met his son and his daughter, and unfortunately passed away before I got to IMG. But you know, I read his books. He was a lawyer. He disrupted the sports industry. In fact, he set up the sports industry. He created professional tennis. He created professional golf with Arnold Palmer, professional tennis with Rod Laver, Bjorn Borg. He pretty much rewrote the book on Formula One with Jackie Stewart, Michael Schumacher. He rewrote the book in the 90s and early 2000s, signing Tiger Woods and Serena Williams and Venus Williams and Roger Federer. So yeah, total inspiration. Didn't meet him in person, but kind of always felt.
That's rewriting the book and not the legal textbook. So
he wrote a book, what they don't teach you in Harvard Business School, and which this is very sad. This is how much he is a hero. I have an audio book, so I've heard his voice. I've heard the great man's voice, but I've never actually met him. But no, you know, I think that has to be, unfortunately, just pips Harvey Specter from Suits, but Martin McCormack.
Yeah, I think that's a sensible pick.
Yeah.
Martin, thank you so much. That's been an absolutely brilliant episode. I love that. Really interesting stuff. Great advice. Thank you very much for giving up the time and joining us.
My pleasure, Tom. All right. Good luck with everything.
Thanks a lot. Thanks very much, everyone, for listening. We'll see you on the next episode.